Hey everybody, how's it going? This is a grumpy old guy, and let's do some gaming. Today, as promised in my last Wizardry upload, we're going to be looking at some Dragon Quest II, and I'm going to be going over a little bit of the prep I did for my ongoing D&D session. First off, a little bit about this game. Dragon Quest II, or Dragon Warrior II, was a game I came upon a little later than I should have. I want to say there was a combo re-release for Game Boy there in the early 2000s, maybe late 90s, early 2000s. I feel it was in that area that had 1 and 2 in the Dragon Warrior series, as it was still being referred to over here. And I picked it up, and I'd never seen part 2 before. Absolutely played the crap out of the original Dragon Quest or Dragon Warrior. I probably bought that NES card about 4 or 5 different times just to make sure I always had a working copy with me over my life. We're going to begin a new quest here, and it's a chill game. It's that classic Dragon Quest feeling. It's a nice, slow, smooth, old-school JRPG. Whereas in the first game, aside from some of the old guys who lived in caves, being a little bit snotty with you if you returned without the quest items, I remember that one guy in the southern peninsula was always a little bit huffy with me, because I forgot what the hell he wanted, and I would always come back too early. But in part 2, everyone just kind of kicks you around. Even the revival message is a little bit condescending. It's like, though you deserved less, you'll see it. I'm sure I'll die. But we're going to ramble here a bit. We're going to play this. We're going to chat about it. And I'm going to chat about my RPG campaign. So if any of this sounds fun, hopefully you'll stick around and enjoy my goofy ass voice talking RPGs. And if not, well, thanks for the visit. I'm going to begin a new quest here. Use my new favorite default name. I've realized that even when I'm not recording games, I now default to Agog on profile names and character names, so that's now a thing. We're going to use fast message speed. And we actually get a bit of cutscenes starting up here. You get the nice little prologue. It's going to talk about Warrior of the Line of Erdrick, and that would be your character from the first Dragon Quest. They came to Aelifgard, defeated the Dragon Lord. Spoilers for those of you who hadn't played the first Dragon Quest. And then for many generations, there's peace. You get that wonderful little ending cutscene, with or without Princess, because again, spoilers, you could actually skip that entire subquest in the first game. And here we are in Moonbrook Castle, where the king is talking to his daughter, the princess, in lovely Nintendo Castle fashion. Just got some random shrubbery right in the middle of a castle. Got some guards coming in. Talking about the evil magic of Hargon. And this must be some of it, as you get these little purple devil guys coming in. This king's kind of badass. He just one-shot one of those suckers. Now he's going to tell the princess to run to safety. But it's a little late for that because the devil guys can teleport in. So as for the D&D stuff, it's going to be slightly out of chronological order right away. Gonna just sort of arrange things as I tell the story in what I feel makes for the most logical progression as it's playing out. So we see the king dying here. So I think today I'm going to go with the initial world setup that I did. As you see, Moonbrook Castle is now under new ownership. It's a big old throne up there. And just as a test of strength on these, little devil guys, that dude just took out 2 guards and gravely wounded a 3rd. Now this guard's going to escape to the castle Middenhall. Strong enough to make it through 2 squares of poison swamp, so that's something. Poor Moonbrook Castle up in flames. As he makes his way to Middenhall, I'm going to preface this by saying the D&D campaign was something I should have probably done years ago. And it's kind of been where I've wanted a dream campaign. I wish I'd have been introduced to the West Marches style of campaign in my late teens, early 20s, when you still have somewhat of a social group. Maybe others still do. But that was a wonderful time for me where I had friends who had free time but also had jobs. So it would have been amazing to just get together with slightly different variations within the same friend group and see what adventuring parties could have gone week to week. In a West Marches style, for those who are unfamiliar, I'll give you my rough, crude, non-official, canon take on it. It's a system of running a campaign out of a central hub town or area, where groups of adventurers just head out into the surrounding world and use that town or area as their hub space to return to, rest, recover, and, procure new items and everything. But they really just go on these little subplots and smaller adventures and maybe lead into a larger chain overall. Get done with the talking here. I'm going to talk around. As you may see, the menu is whittled down a little from the first Dragon Quest. We finally get that modern innovation of stairs just working as stairs. Gonna come down here. The king gives us a treasure chest. These still aren't super smooth. And then we're told to go to Castles Cannock and Moonbrook. We already kind of know what happened to Moonbrook as we peered beyond the veil there in the intro. We actually have to search on top of the chest here. And we discover a copper sword and 50 gold, so that's nice. Go ahead and equip that. Leather armor's ready equipped. So we're ready to get going. And of course the first guy out reminds us to equip. Everyone's sad to see us go. Now I'm not running a traditional West Marches style campaign. What I'm running instead is kind of a generic sandboxy world. And just starting different groups in different places. So literally get a combat here, the first square out of the castle. Technically still on the castle style. And this first little bit is just going to be gaining some experience. But here we are Agog. And we are just basic sword boy fighter. There isn't much to this character. We're never going to have any sort of real magic power. We are a fightery McFighter fighter. And the reason there are 3 descendants of Erdrick is to sort of space out the combat roles. There is our blue slime of doom. How you know you're playing Dragon Quest, adorable little blue slime. I decided I wanted to play in this style with a larger, expansive world. And I want to say my inspiration for that is most likely the Arabian Nights tales, the 1001 Arabian Nights. It's one of my low-key favorite books of all time. One of the few childhood treasures that made it out of my super disrespectful and destructive childhood, where if it wasn't a baseball related thing, I probably didn't care about it as much as I should have. Was a copy of the Arabian Nights tales that was beautifully illustrated, written for kids. That was a book I absolutely adored through my childhood. Gave that copy to a good friend when I was dead broke, when they were having their first kid. It was my little contribution to them. Doubt that book still survives because it has been years since it has been years. But it was honestly the thing of most sentimental value that I had. Now we're just going to stick close to Middenhall here, and when we need, we will just duck in and go to the inn. Only 4 pieces of gold, that is super cheap. It will scale. The goal here is to get both of the other descendants of Erdrick into our party, and the inn will charge a rate per person. So that will be 4 per person here for a max total of 12. But I wanted to go ahead with this system where different parties are completing different quests, and it's going to influence a larger overall sort of picture of the world. And all of these little shorter adventures and stories will kind of loosely tie together and make this tapestry of the world picture in an age. As we hit level 2. So that was my idea. Problem is, I've done so much in the little bastardized homebrew D&D world that I created over the years that just the thought of trying to run it again was kind of exhausting to me. And I kind of hit a breaking point just trying to get a game together over this winter, as it seemed like every time I tried it just wasn't working out. So I did another thing I wish I'd have done years ago, and in fact I did years and years ago and just sort of got out of the practice of. When I first started playing full-on formal Dungeons and Dragons, that first step may be coming soon. But when I first got into the practice, I really didn't have many people to play with, or really anyone. I just kind of had the 1983 red box version of BASIC. And I would just roll up characters and sort of make my own little dungeon crawl stories in my head, rolling monster encounters on the wandering charts in the back of the Dungeon Master's book. So I was doing some solo RPG stuff before that was really an in vogue thing. I kind of got back into that. But I didn't go right back to BASIC. In fact, this was about the time that I started scoping out Shadowed Ark and some other independent systems, and one that really piqued my interest was actually Cairn. I liked how simple it was to pick up, and how different it played. It really... I was a little dubious of the claim that it was a narrative role-playing system, and then I played it and, yeah, 100% dead on the money. But I had actually rolled up a couple different things at once. I decided to build myself a little bit of a mega dungeon. It ended up being 4 floors and 100 rooms. And I was going to run some Shadow Dark characters through there using a couple of solo tools. I found a nice little 1-page oracle for yes and no questions, and I started with an amalgamation of the Shadow Dark quick start rules, and still using the Dungeon Master's book of the red box set for the Wandering Monster tables, because those work out nicely for, you know, little dungeon crawls. It's what I knew, it's what I had, it's what I used. And then for overworld adventures, I rolled up some different characters in Cairn, and I would play them back and forth depending on what I was feeling in the mood for. If I was feeling more of a traditional D&D feel, especially with the amount of 5th edition that I had played in the last decade, played, talked, ran, I would do the Shadow Dark stuff, and I'd drawn up the dungeon, but I hadn't populated it, so my goal was to just sort of journal down what I was doing in that dungeon, and populate it as I went. I remember my first Shadow Dark character instantly made me fall in love with the game. You may notice if you've gone back through the last couple uploads I've done. First off, thank you for that. But I've been gushing about this game. I rolled up a Bard, which was an optional class. It's not in the core books. It was designed in a live stream as a Kickstarter stretch goal. And just watching the YouTube uploads of those streams gave me such a fascinating insight. Kelsey at the Arcane Library, the designer of Shadow Dark, such a personable individual on the uploads, and such an incredible mind for game design and RPG brain that that was my binge watch as I'm getting ready to do this, watching her create with the chat the Bard and the Ranger. And the Bard really stuck out to me as a really fun sort of general class. So I rolled it up, and I'm rolling my stats down the line, and the great thing about the Bard is all I'm really concerned about is the charisma. And I actually get some really good stats. Save 1. Got a Constitution score of 5. Had a -3 modifier on a D6 hit die class. I actually had to roll high to survive. I rolled a 5 for my hit points, so I started with 2. There was a 50% chance that character wasn't making it out of creation by rules. I guess you could have gone with minimum 1 hit points, but let's be honest, it was tough enough to play a 2 hit point Bard. So it became a cranky old guy Bard who was coming out of retirement for reasons unbeknownst. And I gave myself a little level 0 NPC to just pick locks and stay out of trouble. And I gave myself the benefit of a second character. I made a goblin fighter swinging a great axe that was as big as he was, named Magnus Brutus. Big brute. And I made him a lawful goblin, too, because he's not just a goblin, he's a just goblin. That's sort of the level of humor I'm dealing with myself there. So I've got my party of floating lockpicks NPC. Perpetually Death's Door Bard and Goblin Fighter. And that's the group I'm going to be hitting this dungeon crawl with. At least to start. In Cairn, I rolled up some characters, and I had done... The first character I rolled up literally came out like the bad guy in the Frosty the Snowman cartoon. He was a failed magician. He had luxurious hair and a damaged face. because I just rolled a few of the physical features just to flesh it out. Hit protection was less than stellar. And I actually had to sell off some of the starting gear just to make this a viable character. I had to sell and downgrade. I remember I rolled a bow, but couldn't actually afford room for arrows and be able to cast a spell without being fully encumbered. And I didn't want to lose what little hit protection I had and just go straight to death. So I ended up selling the bow for a sling and just decided to sling whatever stones I could find on the ground. And this became my start of my overworld campaign. It's a lot of ducking in and out here in Dragon Quest too, by the way. I probably don't have to go that hard at it. I'm gonna try leveling up to 4 here before we start making any real progress. As you can see, we're more regularly one-shotting the slimes. So the first Cairn adventure, my poor unfortunate failed magician with his light spell and his sling stumbles across this abandoned monastery. He starts scoping it out because, well, he's a bum. He's a homeless adventurer that failed at the one occupation he tried. So he's kind of roughing it, trying to make it out on his own. And he runs into an NPC that I originally rolled a neutral disposition for. So I had them not immediately hostile, but kind of shooed me out of the abbey. So I did what all good adventurers did. I camped out the night and then tried to sneak in the next day. And I actually ran into this NPC again by virtue of random rolls in the kitchen. I'd fleshed them out a little bit, and this time I rolled the disposition was friendlier. I actually attempted to recruit them to a party and did so. And when finishing out the character from, basics for an NPC to be encountered to fully fleshed Cairn character, they turned into more of a hunter type with more hit protection. And the random item I rolled for them was cooking pots, so finding them in the kitchen made sense. So I just sort of had it that they were another sort of outcast that had stumbled upon the abbey first and was using it as a sort of base of operations, and they were just sort of hunting and foraging in the area. So this group of scoundrels started forming, using the abbey as their base. While all of that's going on, back in the dungeon, my poor bard and goblin fighter make it through the first level through some very lucky die rolls. They encountered... It was a lot of fire beetles and skeletons. So it could have really gone a lot worse. I wanted to limit it at like 3 types of monster per floor in that dungeon. And then I decided to, by this point I had already ordered unnatural selection. I was able to back that light. Unnatural selection is a third-party supplement coming out expanding upon the Shadow Dark rules. Ooh, first crit, 30 points to that Iron Ant. Nice. But we had ordered that, and I had planned on getting the Shadow Dark core book when it became available. Managed to do so. We've also reached the town of Leftwyn here. Or Leftwine. I'm going to go with Leftwyn, because that's how I've always said it. Now we're up to 6 pieces of gold, but we're up to 146 of our own money, so feeling good about that. One thing that is ever frustrating is talking to NPCs in these games. And it's just going over basic stuff like poison here. One thing I realized is solo play with the traditional Shadow Dark torches or an hour of real time was not going to work fairly for the game. It was the one thing I could say that truly worked in my favor, because I scoured that whole floor in about 40 minutes. Because again, this is just basic roll through. The story's going on in my head. I don't have to stop for narration. I'm handling all of the rolls, both monster and characters. I'm just sort of going at it, using a little Altoids tin as a dice tray, playing on a little stool in the setup here, and journaling as I go. But I got through all, I want to say 24 rooms of the main part of my first floor. There's a northern section that you could access via passages from lower floors back up, and it's how you get to a special section in the fourth floor, but that is another story for another time. But we get through the first floor proper, get down to the second floor, and things are getting a little intense for my two characters. Plus, I feel like at that point I should probably have a character that is tied to, the rules of mortality as my rogue type. So I go back, and I had been investing in the books and also looking at a fair bit of third-party content that was out there, and I remember someone had released a bunch of classes for free to take a look at that were just sort of offshoot classes that handled sort of niche areas, like a duelist that was more of your, rogue type rogue as opposed to a classic thief, which, just throwing this out here now, I love the classic thief, D4 hit points and the like, but this party needed as much help as it could get. So I'd rolled one of them up, and I made the ruling that since they had a beefier hit die and everything, they weren't a true thief. They could still use the thieves' tools, but it would take up an inventory slot. So I now had a party of 3 for the dungeon. Only I decided not to run the full 3, because again, the bard had 2 hit points and was a crotchety old guy. So I just kind of figured he retired. Going to take a look in the weapon shop here. Got about 146 gold, and that isn't good for anything here. Really, there isn't much we'd even be looking for us here. Maybe the chainmail. That's about it. Well, I say that, and then I realize there's a leather shield there. Let's go ahead and get that leather shield equipped, because we will need all the defense we can get. So we need to go north of here to get to Castle Canic and deal with the proudest papa of all the kings. Got 3 Iron Ants now, and they get the jump on us. Probably because we're talking about other RPGs, huh? So my duelist and my goblin fighter are going to prepare for the second foray into the mega dungeon. And I use the word mega dungeon loosely. But I always wanted to draw up a bigger dungeon. So that was one of the things I did. And it's just going to be kind of hanging out in my world. Speaking of that world, back to the Karen side, my hunter and magician start investigating the woods outside of the abbey. Basically just looking for food, and they run into some bogles. can't remember if they were bogles or boggarts. Either way, little sort of like fairy goblin things, I guess, is the best way for me to describe it. Probably not, but that's what I'm going with. See another classic Dragon Quest monster there in the Drakey. Making some good progress here. May hit level 5 if we survive. There's a ghost mouse, which doesn't look like a ghost or a mouse. Just gonna try dipping into the castle there, and we made it. Nice thing is, every place is gonna have an inn. This one's gonna cost us 8, but 8 is worth our life. So the reason I remember this encounter, but not so much the monsters, is I remember it was a B word. It was either bogle or boggart. But the hook with Cairn is it's based off of the Into the Odd combat system, where there is no rolling to hit. You just sort of do your damage, and if it beats armor and protection, it starts dealing damage to the strength score, which is your erstwhile health. There's level 5. So we'll make our way back down to Leftwyn, and then back up to Cannock and progress the quest. But I had actually got down to exactly 0 protection on my magician. He got his first scar, and his hit protection increased by a bit. But it was a successful battle. I think he had incurred a broken rib or something to that effect. And I did a little downtime rolling once they had got back into the Abbey. And it led to this interesting sort of plot hook where they found a strange box buried underneath a floorboard in this room that was all dusty and everything, but the box itself seemed perfectly brand new. And all of the metal within the room was old and tarnished and rusty because, again, this abbey had been abandoned for longer than really an undetermined amount of time. It had just been sitting there. But they look inside this box that seems almost new enough that you can almost get that wood smell off the box itself. And they look inside, and there's some random notes in a language they don't recognize, and a brass key. And the brass key doesn't even have a speck of dust on it. It once again looks perfectly new in this strange old room. So they have this mysterious key, and they start looking around. And they find this old map of the area, and it showed a tower just on the other side of a creek in the southern part of the forest behind the abbey. So that was the next adventure, because there was certainly no trace of any tower in that area. Made it to level 5, so we're gonna head up here in Castle Cannock, and yeah, I just love the completely open jails here. You kind of have to stand next to the doors in the jails here and wait for the prisoner to come by and talk to them there. And he'll tell us about the keys. In the first Dragon Quest, you had to buy magic keys that were one use only. Here, this game has a silver key and a gold key, and they correspond to the different door designs. This would need the gold key to open, and there are other doors that require the silver key. I want to say this is a shop in here. No, okay, this is the Princess of Cannock Castle. She's, I guess, also technically a descendant of Erdrick, or maybe she's adopted or from another line. All sorts of unspoken of intrigue here. Are we a friend of her brother's? Yeah, I've never met him. He's my best friend. Just get some advice for saying yes. He has gone searching for the Spring of Bravery, but he travels slowly. So do we. It took us 5 levels to get here. Gonna talk to the king, and the kings are where we can start saving. His son Orfeo. I don't think that's the name I got the first time out. I wonder if those are... Because I had played through a previous file. I wonder if those are randomly generated as well. But I like the name Orfeo. I do wish to put the deeds down here. We're going to head back to Castle Middenhall and just sort of make that the wrap-up point here. I see we're at 36 minutes, and honestly, I got to get rolling. Got a job interview here in a couple hours, and got to get the boyo up and rolling for his next day of school. But we have a mysterious key as a wonderful plot hook. Meanwhile, as I said, I had a duelist and a goblin fighter going back down into the dungeon, and they make it relatively incident-free through that first level and hit the second level. And there's one big change to how I'm running this at this point, because again, the Arcane Library, possibly the coolest TTRPG community I've ever seen, by the way. I had joined the Discord and have been lurking there ever since. I don't think I've made a post yet for a while there. There was a constant reminder from the rules little sub-thread to go and say hi that would pop up after every so often of me just lurking and not saying hi. I'm a little sad that that's not popping up anymore. I think they disabled it. Picked up a medical herb there and a treasure chest, which is fantastic because that means we didn't have to spend cash on a medical herb, and we can now save ourselves from a bit of bad luck. Get some good luck here in a surprise round. But anyway, the Arcane Library, Kelsey puts out the first rough draft for Solo Dark. She had been working on a solo engine and Oracle system for Shadow Dark, and just sort of throws out the PDF for people to check out and give a try. More than happy to, because solo RPGing is my jam at that moment. So I'm giving it a try, and it's got rules for the torch, just having a certain number of points available to it, and between that and deciding to tick off a moment if I had to run or so many rooms. It really sort of added that sense of urgency back in that was missing. By this point, I had run a couple of sessions of Shadow Dark with my family and was preparing to start fleshing out this world to run a bit proper as far as a D&D game. But I wanted to get a bit more of this dungeon done before I sat down and did more of that. So I got back into the second floor there, and I remember there was a room where there was a trap that my party hadn't noticed, and it was just a silly little, rope lying on the ground. But my fighter had triggered it. And there were some kobolds in the area. And the kobolds had set up the trap. My fighter was hanging by his ankle. And they just ran through the poor duelist. Just one round, no chance. The fighter eventually got free, and I actually rolled, since the fighter's in like full plate mail, is a heavy sucker, and Shattered Arc kobolds literally only have one hit point, that just falling out of that trap, he had landed on one of the kobolds and killed them. I had made it through enough to drag the duelist back and escape myself. But I'm now down a rogue character, and I'm back down to one. So my fighter sort of limped back to town, talked the bard out of retirement, and I rolled up a classic thief who I named Lucky Day. Gave him the wanted background, so he had just popped into the tavern running from the guards. And it was his lucky day. He found an adventuring troop to run away with before anyone could ask too many questions. So I'm getting ready for my third adventure in Cairn. I'm getting ready for my third foray into the dungeon, and that's where I started fleshing my world out, and I think that's where we're going to leave this here. If you enjoyed this, and I do hope you did, because I certainly enjoyed just getting a chance to ramble here, talk RPGs with you, and play this fun game. We're just getting set up. Next time we're going to go through the Spring of Bravery, see if we can't just track down another descendant of Erdrick, make some more levels, and maybe die and see how death and resurrection is handled in Dragon Quest II. In the meantime, this has been a Grumpy Old Guy Gaming, thanking you for watching. Do hope you're well out there. Take care, and we'll see you around.